Hi, I'm Joe Spina, and welcome to the Joe Show, where truth is our mission, reality our realms, said as we see it, and frankly as well. Truth be known, I'm a climate skeptic. I always have been. The science, to me, needs to be examined far more closely than it has been. Nevertheless, I do like clean air and clean water and a pristine environment. But here's the fact of the matter. The world isn't pristine. The industrial world is filthy. The streets of New York, Chicago, LA, Philly, our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., are dirty, as is the case in urban enclaves throughout America and the entire world. Trash and neglect have taken their toll. This may surprise you, but America's #1 export to China, guess what? It's garbage. And you know what China does? Recycles it, makes product, and sells it back to us. Amazing. Back to point. I despise plastic bags, and there's very few things that I despise, but plastic bags happens to be right on that list. They're everywhere, blowing in the wind, as the song goes, and raising havoc in our oceans. It's a big problem. It's a massive polluter. What to do? Well, that brings me to the G7 meeting, which is taking place as I Zoom. President Biden is over in England and is going to meet with the world leaders to discuss world problems. And the world problem, or the growing world problem to me, would be plastic waste. It should be right up on top of their agenda. Getting universal and a workable definition as to what a plastic bag is would be a great first step. What is a plastic bag? Or is a plastic bag a plastic bag? Well, you know what? That depends. It depends. And unbelievably, there are 7 different definitions of a plastic bag, which certainly complicates things. Banning bags, along with other plastic packaging, is the most commonly used remedy to rein in plastic waste. The question is, does it work? And is it working? Now, I'm not a big fan of banning much. I'm kind of a libertarian, kasada and let nature take its course. But when it comes to plastic bags, my orthodoxy takes a back seat. As it stands, there are 115 nations who have issued bans against plastic bags or plastic material. Unfortunately, there are 115 different ways in which they do it. For example, in France, if a plastic bag measures 15 microns thick, banned. Not so in Tunisia, right across the Mediterranean. No, in Tunisia, bags are banned if they're less than 40 microns thick. And so it goes. Everybody establishes their own standard. And without standardization, we have chaos. And differences invariably create loopholes. Lawyers love differences because loopholes are what keeps lawyers in business. Loopholes enable illegal bags to find their way to street vendors and markets, stalls everywhere. For example, unbeknownst to me, but back in 2017, 4 short years ago, Kenya passed the world's toughest plastic bag ban. That's a good thing. You know what happened? Right afterwards, what followed was a whole bunch of illegal bags were smuggled into Kenya from neighboring Uganda and Somalia. Rwanda, an African nation, imports millions and millions of mosquito nets from the United States. Unfortunately, when some of these mosquito nets arrived, they arrived in plastic packaging, which should not be a big deal except for one thing. The chemical content within that plastic wrappings was not disclosed and consequently rendered the plastic unrecyclable. For global companies like Nestle, by the way, I never knew this, that they sell foods in 187 different countries, which means that they have to comply with 887 different sets of national regulations on plastic packaging. That is a challenge and a half, I must say. Not only do definitions differ from country to country, there's also no global rules such as practices as determining which plastic material can be mixed with another product that creates a potential nightmare for recycling. So internationally accepted methods on how to measure plastic waste spilling into the environment just doesn't exist. Without uniform standards or specific data, the job of fixing the plastic pollution problem becomes essentially impossible. So there's a dire need for international standardization, which again is the subject, or should be the subject, of the G7 meeting, get together. To date, 100 nations have expressed support for a plastics treaty. Preliminary talks are optimistic, but you know what they are? They're talks. Talks, no action. Government will be able to do what they're supposed to do, or governments will be able to do what they're supposed to do, or if they can't count on international partnership or international framework. In other words, look, if the United States wants to do something, it needs the cooperation of France, Germany, China, Cambodia, whatever. They all have to get together and agree upon a set of standards so that they can take action accordingly. Now, here is the reality. Here is what is happening. New plastic waste is created nearly at the rate of 303 million tons per year. Get that? Creating 303 million tons. 75% of all plastic that's ever been produced, 75% has become waste. And production is expected to triple within the next generation. So let's take a peek. The accumulation of plastic waste in the ocean is also expected to triple in that time frame, from an average of 32 million tons a year. Now think about that. And by the way, what's fascinating, and I wasn't able to pull up some research I did years ago on this topic, but fish sometimes mistake the plastic for whatever, and they start eating it, and they can't digest it. It gets into their system. We fish the fish, and guess what? We're getting fish with plastic inside of them. Not very good for us either. In many instances, this plastic is non-biodegradable, and that's a real problem I have with it. Plastic pollution has been on the agenda of the United Nations for the past decade. You know what's been done? Zero. In 2019, the UN Environmental Assembly gathered in Nairobi, back in Kenya, to talk about plastic waste. The only agreement was an agreement to keep talking. Christina Dixon, who is an oceans specialist and someone worth listening to, says that the existing methods of managing the plastic marketplace are not sustainable. We need to find a way to look at plastic with a global lens. I would say so. We have a material, and this is in bold, we have a material that is polluting throughout its life cycle and across borders. No country is able to address the challenge by itself. Enter G7.